So, hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is making effective and compliant advertising claims in Asia. So obviously Asia is a huge continent. So this is going to be a bit of a broad overview in this webinar. So we'll be looking at the Asian market. Just to say, this webinar is being recorded and there will be a Q&A at the end. Sorry, I nearly missed that one. But basically, yeah, Asia's huge, but it's mainly, we're going to look at this in this webinar, how to find the information you need to, and we'll be looking at some specific regulations and things like that within Asia. So obviously, at the moment, I'm sure a lot of you are in the cosmetics industry. It's where most people make claims, so I'm kind of used to kind of having a mainly cosmetics industry. And there's obviously the new cosmetics regulations in China. So we'll touch on that a little bit as well. But again, mainly kind of giving you guys the information that you need to be able to find those regulations and all of the information that you'll need to continue developing your products and making sure that you're making compliant advertising claims. So we'll start off by looking at advertising standards and organisations and some examples of who is regulating adverts within Asia. The legislation surrounding advertising claims. So obviously we'll look a little bit at CSR in particular. Challenges of advertising and exporting in Asia, claim substantiation methods. So obviously we're not just talking about the legal side of claims today, how to make effective, powerful and successful advertising claims as well. So to really give you some kind of advice on that, we'll look at some case studies as well and some, how we've managed to conduct studies to be able to ensure people have the evidence they need to substantiate their claims. And we'll finish off with some examples of withdrawn adverts in Asia as well, because it's always good to see what not to do as well as what you should be doing. So to introduce myself, if people haven't seen me or met me before, my name's Carys and I'm the Regulatory Director at Ayton Global Research. So I've worked there for about 8 years now. So started off as a study manager, so understanding how to work with clients and understand their research objectives and how they need to use their evidence. And obviously down that path, I really got a kind of love and passion for the regulations behind why people make advertising claims, how that's regulated to make sure people are fair in the industry and what we can do to help not just provide the evidence but to provide guidance for our clients as well, because there's nothing better than doing a consumer study and seeing the evidence that we've provided, quoted in things like advertising. It makes me really proud, and it makes me proud to be part of the industry. And it makes me proud as a consumer as well. I think I obviously have a real love for the brands that we work with, because I know that if I'm purchasing their products, that the advertising claims are not going to be misleading. So that's really where my passion lies, is in regulation from a professional and a kind of personal point of view. So I've travelled around the world to provide lectures on advertising standards and claim substantiation. Obviously not this year, but these webinars have been a great kind of ability for me to get out in the world anyway and provide this advice. So I love having a one-to-one kind of relationship with clients. Always feel free to approach me if you want any regulatory advice or if you want any study advice, things like study design and questionnaire design and stuff like that as well. We are a very personable company, and certainly I can speak for myself. Like I said, I love developing a relationship with my clients and really making sure that they can use their evidence where they need to. So to kind of start off, let's have an overview. So as I said, a lot of you are going to be from the cosmetics industry. If you're not from the cosmetics industry, don't worry. A lot of this is going to be applicable to all industries. It's just, as I say this all the time, the cosmetics industry really is where we see the majority of advertising claims. It's a very contested market and people use cosmetics because they want some kind of effect. So it's where we see a lot of advertising claims, and it's obviously where a lot of the regulations are kind of based to do with kind of claim substantiation and generally for the cosmetics industry. But if you're not in the cosmetics industry, please feel free to carry on watching because there will be some kind of cross regulations that I think will be really helpful. So the cosmetics industry is an overview though. For those of you who are, is obviously huge in Asia. So Asia Pacific is generally the kind of area that we're referring to when we're looking at segmenting the market. So the Asia Pacific area accounts for 41% of the worldwide cosmetics market, and that was calculated 2019, so only last year. And that's obviously going to be huge. If you think if you're selling globally, 41% of your market could just be in Asia Pacific. So it's really important to make sure that you've got some great adverts to kind of sell your products over there, make sure that you're taking a part of that market share, but also that you're doing it legally. So China, Japan and South Korea are very much the leaders for beauty and cosmetics, and we'll be looking at some case studies for those countries later. And Vietnam is actually catching up rapidly. So it's just a great sort of thing to think about when you're looking at those markets, where this specifically is looking like a really promising market for you. Also from Cosmetics Design Asia, according to the International Trade Administration, the growth in 2020 for cosmetics and personal care was mainly within Thailand and the Philippines. As parts of Asia. So I think that's, again, a really good thing to point your attention to, especially when you're looking at conducting studies, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is obviously you should be looking at testing your products in the markets that you're looking to launch them. So really, when you're thinking about Asia, you can't think, okay, I need to test in every single Asian country. It wouldn't be possible. You'd have to put out a lot of products and it would cost a lot of money. So we look at kind of relevant areas that you can test your product in. So if you're thinking, these are going to be the top key markets in Asia, that's where I'm going to test my products. So it's really a good way to sort of think about it. So a really good way to think about, to always think about the market first before you look at doing your studies, because obviously you want to make sure that you're testing in those locations. Obviously, there's going to be an impact of COVID-19. So certainly within the cosmetics market, I've been watching a lot of webinars myself about the impact that COVID-19 has had on the cosmetics industry. And really everyone's kind of in the same position, where obviously there's a huge shift to online. It's the way it is. I know that we've been talking a lot about how people can't test cosmetics anymore in terms of, a sample in the shop for a foundation shade or something like that. And everyone needs to change their mindset virtually. So this is obviously the same in Asia as well. So just some interesting points. So the prestige market has been really hit in Asia, and P&G have their brand SK2. I never know how to pronounce these ones. So SK2, I think it is. And they have declined by more than 20% in Q3. So that's a huge drop for the prestige market, approximately $1 billion in business in dollars. So then that's also been affected by travel retail apparently. So it's when you think about the kind of overall sort of where prestige sits, a lot of people purchase that as part of the travel retail, duty-free products, online, on the plane and things like that, and certainly in those prestige stores in airports. The travel retail industry has been really, really impacted, obviously. So it's not a great time to be a prestige brand in Asia, but certainly think about how you can turn that around. And like I said, if travel retail is going down, certainly look at poising your brand online and really focusing on advertising online. And also, the Southeast Asia market has been obviously directly impacted, and there's been a real decline in cosmetics and personal care there. So it's just to be really wary that there has been a decline. It doesn't mean that it's all going to be doom and gloom. We might see a decline this year, but it's really thinking about changing our focus and how we're going to market our products to make sure that we can still sell them. So to start off around the regulation side of things, we'll talk about ad self-regulation. Because this is always the overall regulation that you always need to think about with advertising claims. Who is regulating those adverts? So before you kind of consider whether they're compliant or not, who tells you if they're compliant? So ad self-regulation is really globally the way that advertising is regulated in every country. And the overall kind of themes to think about are always that the adverts are legal, decent, honest, and truthful. So like I said, this is kind of a global thing, and so no different in Asia, that you really need to be aware of ad self-regulation and how that works. So basically, you have a self-regulatory organization. It's usually for country bases, sometimes for continent bases like the EASA, but on country levels, they'll have their own code of conduct, and they'll say how adverts should be presented in their own countries to make sure they're not misleading, but also to make sure that they're not offensive and things like that. If they don't kind of sort of police adverts so much. So they won't necessarily be scouring the internet to see every single brand and what the claims are. And if those claims are substantiated, they tend to work as a complaints basis. So it's ad self-regulation, because really it's up to you as the advertiser. As I've put on the slide, there's three parts. So the advertisers who are paying for the advertising agencies responsible for its form and content, and the media that carry it. All three of those parts of the industry should be looking at the code of conduct and regulating it themselves. They shouldn't sort of be going, okay, I might see what I can get away with. You should be looking at the code of conduct and making sure that your adverts comply with that, because really it should be a self-regulatory industry. However, if you aren't doing that, people can complain about your product to the advertising authorities in that country, whether it's your consumer, so someone who's purchased your product and thinks, actually, these claims, I don't think they're substantiated because it hasn't worked, or for your competitors as well. So again, if you're, and you might do it for your competitors, if you think your competitors are making claims, or your competitors think you are making claims that aren't evidence-based, that aren't substantiated, they can complain to the advertising authorities. The advertising authorities will then come to you and make sure that you've got evidence behind them. If you do, fantastic, you can carry on. And if you don't, you will have to have your advert removed in whatever form. Obviously, if you've got that advert printed all over your pack copy, which is very common to have claims in your pack copy, you'll have to withdraw your whole product recall, which you really don't want to have to do. So it's really important to not take any risks and make sure that your adverts are compliant before you even put them on the market. The other thing is generally advertising authorities like to release people as information, any complaints that have been upheld. So if you've had a complaint about your product, you haven't got the evidence behind it, it tends to be released. Every country is a bit different, but in terms of Asia, the advertising authorities in India certainly do release information about brands that they think have had misleading adverts. So it's really poor press for your company if you get caught doing it. Just an overview of those kinds of organizations, so self-regulatory organizations. To have a little look for kind of who they are, you can go to the ICC. They've got a framework for self-regulation, which is adopted by about 52 countries. So you can have a little look at who's adopting that framework and go from there. And you've also got ICAS, which is the International Council of Ad Self-Regulation. And they're a council of global SROs that have come together with kind of shared opinions to sort of say news about the advertising standards and really share a code of conduct. So if you're kind of like, well, I've got a few countries in Asia, I kind of need to know about all of those organizations, they're a really good place to look, certainly ICAS, and see who's on their members, because they've got a list of all of them. I think it's about 27 countries now. And you can see, if any of those countries are part of that, because they do tend to have a really similar code of conduct. There isn't a lot of countries that are really, if they're all part of ICAS or kind of similar part of the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce, they do tend to have really shared code of conduct. So don't feel like you're going to get caught out by having very differing opinions from different countries. Generally, it's all about evidence, but obviously some may have more specific advice than others. So certainly be aware, and it's also something that we can really help with. If you know what markets you're looking at launching into, we can kind of do a gap analysis on your claims and make sure that you've got the evidence you need to substantiate them for the market that you're looking to sell your product. So specifically for Asia, examples always really help. So some are going to be part of ICAS, and some are not necessarily. I know that China advertising standards aren't part of ICAS, but they do follow the ICC framework. So again, it's all these kind of like really similar kind of consistencies throughout different organizations that are regulating adverts. So just some examples there for you. So as I said, China advertising standards, we've got Singapore, Malaysia, India, and the Philippines. They have all got different self-regulatory organizations. And certainly India, Singapore, Malaysia, and the Philippines are incredibly similar. But there will be little kind of differences there. So really worth looking at the code of conduct. It doesn't tend to be overwhelming. Most countries are really, really well broken down. So if you want to make claims about cosmetics, they'll have a section for that on their code of conduct, and you can have a little look at the specifications there, and it's not an overwhelming amount of information. It's not like a kind of EU cosmetics regulation where it's pages and pages and pages of information. It's really well laid out and broken down for most countries. There's also laws. So we've got our advertising organisations. We know what their code of conducts are. But what, apart from that, what's really important for advertising is what's illegal to say, not just what's kind of recommended or what's kind of used as guidance. So obviously, you don't want to make illegal adverts either, not just uncompliant adverts. So I've put out some examples there. Every country has advertising laws. There's no country I've come across that doesn't have advertising laws. Some don't even have any advertising authorities, but they do have advertising laws. So it's really important to be aware of. So in India, you've got the Drugs and Magic Remedies Act. So this is something that looks at advertising of drugs in India. In Indonesia, you have the KPI and the PPPI, and they are working with the Advertising Council of Indonesia. So they tend to work together. Advertising law and advertising authorities do have a shared approach when it looks at advertising. And China's got the advertising law of the People's Republic of China, and that was revised in 2015 to make sure that there are tougher regulations and sort of stricter rules on advertisers to really protect consumers. So even that, I know that's 5 years ago now, but this is why it's so important to be aware of the laws, because they do get updated. It's really important they do. Things change a lot. The way we can advertise now has changed a lot from, I think before that it was like the 80s. We've got the internet, we've got social media, we've got influencers. There's a lot more advertising going on, and it's really important that the laws kind of catch up with that. So always be looking out for those laws. Even if you've done you've actually sort of advertised a product in China in 2008, revisit that now. Is this evidence still enough to substantiate your claims with the kind of advertising laws, the advertising law being reinstated? Just a little warning, again, going back to COVID-19. If there's anything we've learned this year, I think when we started doing these webinars back in March, I sort of thought this won't be, something I'm talking about still in September, nearly October, but it really is. And if there's anything we've seen in the news recently, it's not slowing down, and it's certainly something we have to be aware of. So I will bring up my webinar still. But obviously all the different advertising authorities and even the federal agencies like the FDA and the FTC have all come together to make some real clear warnings about advertising with COVID-19 in mind. So there was a big surge in companies, and actually certainly within Asia, that were kind of having really misleading adverts where they'd say this face mask will protect you against COVID-19 100%, or this the CBD oil will help cure COVID-19, and it's all just not true. So it's kind of this real, it's just a real clear warning to say, don't use people's fear to make sure you can sell products. And that's come from all the different advertising authorities. They won't be forgiving it. And as I said before, there was, people work on a complaints basis with adverts. When it's come to COVID-19, there really has been a policing kind of approach to looking at those adverts as well. So be really, really cautious. Just because you're making a product that has maybe benefits for COVID-19, you can make claims for it. Things like hand gel and things like that. You can certainly look at making those about your product still, but make sure they're compliant and go along with the code of conduct, and that you have evidence to substantiate those claims. So that's kind of our advertising part, or the advertising regulations. I want to make some really, just give some information about different cosmetics regulations within Asia as well. Again, just to point your kind of direction towards where you can find some really helpful information if Asia is a new market for you. So you've got the ASEAN Cosmetic Directive. So I'm not sure people are aware of ASEAN, but it's a lot of countries within Asia that kind of have this cohesive, a bit like the EU, I guess, when you think about the EU cosmetics regulation. You've got the ASEAN Cosmetic Directive. So they all have these shared regulations basically about cosmetics, and it covers things like the definitions of what cosmetics are, what makes a cosmetic, what makes a medicine, what makes a borderline product, all the labeling requirements, so what you need to put on your label, the safety assessment requirements, which includes the adverse event reporting, any documentation that you need, and any limits of contaminants. So it's really, really helpful if you haven't launched into Asia before, or even if you aren't aware of it and you are looking to launch into Asia, just to see what's needed. Again, that will apply to all the different countries that are part of the ASEAN region. So really, really helpful to have a little look on that resource basically. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is obviously a really hot topic at the moment. I'm sure I'll release a webinar particularly about CSAR, but at the moment, the information is coming in drips and drabs to me, particularly with translation in mind, because obviously it's all been in Chinese. But we are getting information come through. So for those who don't know, the Cosmetics Supervision and Administration Regulation is going to replace the existing cosmetics regulations in China. It has been released this year, and it will come into effect on the 1st of January 2021. So be really cautious. If you are currently advertising in China, there is going to be some changes. For anyone who is currently in the EU, or who is selling in the EU, I have to say from what I've looked at so far, it's incredibly similar to the EU cosmetic regulations. So that could be really comforting to a lot of you. Things like having a responsible person, things like having all your claims substantiated and the guidance for that is really, really, really similar. So you probably are going to be in good luck if you are already currently doing that. So obviously keep your ear to the ground if you are part of the cosmetics industry and you are selling in China, because you do need to make sure that you are following all of these regulations. So the National Medical Products Administration, or the NMPA, have released some guidance on claim substantiation, which we've done some translation for, and we've started implementing into our systems. A lot of it we already had built in, which is fantastic. But again, if you are looking at conducting studies with us and looking at China, you can be really well assured that we've already seen the NMPA guidelines, and that we are making sure if there is anything that we don't have clear in our procedures, we're adding that in now. So this includes things like the itemised list of what should appear on the study report. It says that the report should be accurate and reliable, and the original records should be true, standardised, complete and traceable. This is all stuff that we have built in because we are, we've got an ISO 9001, which is about our quality assurance. So this is something that we've already had. There's specific analysis that they've asked to be showed on the reports, including the standard deviation for each product, for each claim, sorry. So it's certainly something we've got built in again. The study should be conducted ethically, and the participants must provide informed consent. Again, this was very important for the GDPR. So, I said they're similar to Europe and the EU regulations, even that's been carried through. So the GDPR regulations, when it comes to testing, have certainly been carried through. And again, we were pretty geared up for it anyway, but we had to put in some extra procedures for GDPR, which are now obviously already in place. And studies must be conducted blind to avoid brand bias. Now, this is something that hasn't been very clear in China before. So some people can conduct branded studies. This I see a lot in the USA, where you've got people, sort of really large conglomerates that have their own testing houses. So people will come into that brand's testing house to have their claim, to have the product tested and to supply their claims. Now, if the studies have got to be blind, they obviously can't even go into a testing house that is name that brand. So I think this is really important, obviously anyway, but as I said, in the EU, people tend to use independent testing houses anyway and tend to do studies unbranded. But certainly in the USA, I see a lot of branded studies, or like I said, even going into that brand's testing house, it's very clear who the product is for. That's not going to be allowed at all for any claim substantiation in China. So obviously look at independent testing houses, hopefully us, to get your claims substantiated, because this is something that they're going to crack down on now as part of the NMPA guidelines. So we've talked about the kind of regulations, and obviously I've mentioned claims substantiation so far. So let's look at this specifically. So how do we substantiate claims? And obviously for Ayton Global Research, who I work for, we're a consumer research company. So what does that mean, and what can we substantiate? So we do in-use tests generally, so mainly in-home user studies where participants send products to test at home, and they answer an overall evaluation questionnaire, or they answer different questionnaires online. They basically reflect the actual conditions of the product in use, because people are sent those products with the usage directions that you would see on your packaging, or on the leaflet or something when you receive that product. So it gives you some really real data about how the product's actually going to be accepted by your consumers when they purchase the product. They're basically perception studies, or subjective evaluations. So Obviously, they're not measurements. You can't ask a consumer to say, what percentage are your wrinkles decreased by. That's going to be really unrealistic for a consumer to be able to answer. But you can say, do your wrinkles appear reduced? And you can still use that claim on your packaging. So you can't sort of say things like clinically proven, and you can't use those measurements. Very often, we'll work with clients that will have some clinical testing, so those instrumental studies, and then also have some consumer testing. So certainly for the wrinkle example, you might say this product tackles all signs of aging. And then instead of having an instrumental test for every single sign of aging, because that would be incredibly expensive, you might have just a clinical study that says about the wrinkle reduction in the measurement, and then all of the other signs of aging are what the consumers can actually perceive. So it's certainly something that can be used together. And there are cases where you don't need any clinical testing as well, which really, really helps with those budget savings, because as I say, clinical testing can be really expensive and consumer testing is a great way to save money. And as long as the claims are worded correctly, and as long as it's realistic that a participant could assess that themselves, they're absolutely compliant to use. And certainly as part of the NMPA guidelines as well, they've given some really, really clear, distinct outlines to us about what we can substantiate through the consumer research and what might need additional clinical evidence. So certainly for Asia in particular, we can really give you some very clear guidance if you say what claims you want to make about your product, what we can substantiate, and what we might ask one of our partners to conduct through some clinical research. So that's basically, what you're looking at for consumer research there. It's also for undesirable event reporting. I know I said this earlier with the ASEAN Cosmetics Directive that they ask for undesirable event reporting as well. So this can be really helpful for a consumer study because you're sending out the products again in that actual use. So although you might have a very small sort of safety test about the product, you can have the safety test and then do a consumer study, see on a larger scale when people are using it themselves, are there any more adverse reactions reported? So it's really good at getting that actual condition for the adverse reactions as well. So obviously we're going to be talking about claims today, but I also want to kind of touch on the other reasons you might want to use consumer research, because without, claims are one part of marketing, but also there's a lot of other kind of, reasons that you might want to use that data for your marketing that isn't just about substantiating your claims. So really, I'd encourage to incorporate it as part of your new product development anyway. If you think about the claims that you want to make and how you're going to substantiate them, when you start thinking about the product, the whole process will be very, very smooth, and you'll make sure you've got a compliant product from the get-go. It's also a good way to think about how you can actually test the formulation, the efficacy testing of the product. So certainly there's those claims in mind, but does the product actually work? And does it work when we ask the consumers to use it as they would use it at home? It can really help with product and brand perceptions. So obviously the product perception, the efficacy testing. We obviously mentioned about having blind studies for our claim substantiation, but that doesn't mean we can't reveal the brand after they've answered the efficacy questions. And this is something that we do quite often with brands. So we have, say, 20 questions that are about the efficacy. They still receive a blinded sample and branded sample in plain packaging. And they see all the questions about the efficacy and they answer those. Then once they're completed and we've got those claims substantiated, we can then say, okay, this is the brand, this is the packaging they want to use, this is the colors they want to use, this is how much they want to charge for this product. Having tested it and having tested the efficacy, would you purchase this product? So it's a great way of getting that kind of market research in there as well, while staying compliant with your advertising claims. You can also do benchmark testing, so testing against competitors or reformulations. So you might test against another formulation. That can also be used as a claim. So you can obviously make competitor claims, it's better than this brand, or you can make the formula claims as well to say new and improved formula. Obviously investigating new markets. I said a lot of you may be launching into the Asian market. So if you want to kind of get just that brand perception from the get-go, or, does the product perform the same way as we hope it would, or as it has done in UK tests, you can get all of that information as well. Things like testimonials and reviews as well are incredibly great for your marketing. So, a sort of specifying a volunteer maybe in China and saying that this is what they said about the product, and using that in your marketing as well as those claims. So there's all sorts of reasons why you might want to use it. But it's always really helpful to see how those claims are actually displayed. So I get asked a lot, okay, consumer research, where can I actually use that? Where can I actually use that information, then where can I put those claims? Well, the truth is you can put them anywhere in your marketing. You've substantiated your claims, so there's no reason you can't use them anyway. That's your packed copy, on TV, online, social media, literally anywhere you can use that data. But it really helps to see those examples as well. So I've picked out 3 brands here, Elemis, Charlotte Tilbury and Estee Lauder, who have used their consumer research claims on their website. So this is just on their own website at this point. So obviously you can see how effective that is to have on your website, especially, you know, these are really, really high claims that these products have managed to achieve. So it's not just saying, you know, this product, let's have a look at Charlotte Tilbury, for example, reduces wrinkles and makes your skin feel moisturized. We've got up saying 100% of 103 women that tested it over 4 weeks agree with that claim. Who wouldn't want to purchase that product? I think it's a fantastic way of using that data. It can certainly be frustrating for me as well when I see my clients that have got this amazing data and they don't even say the percentage on their websites. Use it. It also proves that your claims are compliant and you've got evidence behind them. It makes your brand really trustworthy. So these are some fantastic examples that are online. Also, television. So we've got things like Vaseline with 81% of 266 women agreed about their intensive moisturiser. We've got a L'Oreal hair advert there. And we've also got a L'Oreal mass market research survey where they asked about the shade matches. So it doesn't have to just be the claims about the product efficacy. You can also say, you know, this matches more shades than any other. Let's ask about 1,000 people in China, for example, if they think this shade matches their skin tone, and you can use that in your advertising. So you can really think about how to use these claims. And certainly social media. So Augustinus Bader, I can never say that brand name, have done a 12-week consumer study, and they've used the data in a few pictures on their Instagram. So this one's 98% of people agree that their dehydrated skin feels instantly supple and more elastic. And then Elemis as well have done their cleansing foam. 91% of people agree that it's frothy, soothing cleanser, left their skin feeling gently cleansed, purified and refreshed. So excellent way of using those claims also in your social media. So now I want to go over some case studies. So we've seen what the regulations are, and we've also seen how those claims can be used, but how can we actually take that consumer research methodology? How can we run the study to actually get those claims substantiated? So I've got a couple of case studies that I just want to run through with you. So the first one is for a beauty brand, so it's a premium British beauty brand that are looking to test their serum in Asia. So they wanted to test on a range of climates and the kind of key markets that they have in Asia, but also make sure that the product's accepted there, and that, you know, the advertising is compliant, but that the product claims can be agreed with by the participants. So they were really looking for smoother, firmer, and hydrated skin as their main claims. There's obviously a few countries that this product's tested in. So as I said earlier about the different advertising authorities, I just wanted to take some snippets from their code of conduct. So you can actually see, you know, I said it was really, really clear, you know, what kind of how the regulation is, and what you need to be aware of. In Japan, you've got 2 acts that you need to be really aware of when you're making claims. So one is the Act Against Unjustifiable Premiums and Misleading Representations, and Consumer Protection and Fundamental Act. And basically the laws are put in place to prohibit non-factual expressions. So making sure that the claims are substantiated, basically. So that was just examples of what you need to be aware of in Japan. And that authority is the Japan Advertising Review Organization as well. So it just gives you kind of that specific outlook. So this study was actually conducted in Japan, Korea, China, and Hong Kong. That is this brand's main markets in Asia. So they wanted to test some participants in each of those territories to make sure their claims are substantiated and their products accepted. So all of our studies that we do like this, we can break down, we have the overall report, and then we can also break it down by country as well. So it makes it really, really clear how the product's accepted. You can use that overall data in your marketing, but you can also remove data if it's unfavourable and not advertise with those claims in that country. So for example, if Japan didn't pass the advertising claims, they could not advertise in that country and still use the rest of the data to advertise their claims. So it's a single placement study, so only one product was being investigated. 28 days, 4-week study, because obviously the kinds of claims they're looking at, certainly with aging, that really helps to have a longer study to be able to how that affects. We needed all skin types in order to get that all skin type claim, and they had to have multiple signs of aging, so deep set lines, a loss of luminosity and radiance, and skin that was lacking in hydration. And it needs to be national across those countries to make sure that marketing data is going to be reliable. So what were the results? So we had some fantastic results for this product. So this is taken from our report. So I've just taken a few claims out of our report. Basically, at the end of the report, we get this fantastic summary table, which makes it really, really clear what the percentages are of who agrees with your claims. So as we've seen on the website advertising, where we had sort of 100% of people agree with these claims, that is really easy to get from this appendix on our reports. So this one, we've got the claims on the left, so what people said about the product, what the claims were, sorry, what we needed to ask the volunteers about on the study. We've got the number of people that were satisfied and not satisfied, and then the percentage of people that were satisfied and not satisfied. You can see there's a little star on all the percentage satisfied statements on the report. This is because we've set a pass mark. So we can set the pass mark to whatever we need to. We put a 2/3 majority on ours, so 66.66%, to make sure that we've got a statistical majority of participants to pass mark. This can be changed by the brand. Some people, certainly prestige brands, don't want to have anything that's less than 70%. And some people can go lower than that. It's just you're at further risk. It would be up to the advertising authorities to review that data and decide whether, let's say you have 51% of people, they might say that's not a strong enough percentage to be able to make those claims. The regulations vary and it's not incredibly clear. So 66% is very safe to go with. So these obviously have all passed. We can see that the skin, we've got things about the feel of the product on the skin, so it doesn't feel greasy. Skin feeling intensely hydrated, I mentioned that earlier, is one of their key claims. Skin feels soft and smooth, and the product left the skin feeling firmer. So we've got some really great claims there that this brand can use in their advertising. The other case study I wanted to bring up is a hair care range, so a regime of hair cares. So you can test products together, and it's quite common in hair care in particular to make a combined claim. So by using all these products together, you get the best results. Obviously, these products need to be tested together for us to be able to make that claim. So this is something we see really, really common. I know that when I purchased hair care as a consumer, you really often see for best results, use it with this product. So this was for about basically a weather resist hair care regime. So we really wanted to look at humid climates. So India was going to be the target country for this study, because they want to say that the products made the hair weather resistant. And obviously, as we know, humid weather can make your hair very frizzy, certainly can make my hair very frizzy. So this is really what we were focusing on for this product. Again, what was the legislation, particularly in India? And this comes from the Advertising Standards Council of India, basically making sure that every claim should be capable of substantiation, and that you should have that evidence available for review as soon as it's called on by the ASTI. It needs to be supported by independent research. So as I mentioned earlier, you need to have an independent testing house in India as well. And it needs to have the assessment source and date as well in the advertisement. So you need to show who's done the research, on what day, and the amount of people and everything like that, which is in your marketing as well. So what's the breakdown of this study in particular? So we had our regime, so it's a shampoo, conditioner and amplifier. It was a 14-day study. It wasn't as long as the anti-aging one, because we're really looking at the instant results for the product just after a few washes. The Indian panelists had to live in a high humidity area. It had to be over 80% of that time of year. I think this was late summer we conducted this. So obviously we're looking at the average humidity of those territories and only recruiting participants that live in those areas. Another fantastic thing about consumer research and not doing it clinically is obviously we can make sure we recruit anyone in the world, basically, as long as we can send them products and they can access an online questionnaire. It doesn't matter where they live in the world, and we can be really specific about these areas. So we had to make sure that obviously the products were tested on frizzy hair, and it has to be tested with people with frizzy hair in the right climate and the right humidity. So that is how we kind of conducted that one. And this again is the results. So we've got the exact same table as we had before with our breakdown of who's satisfied and not satisfied. And this time we're looking at those real weather claims. So things like my hair is protected from humidity, my hair is protected from extreme weather, my hair is manageable, and my hair feels ultra smooth for up to 2 days. We managed to substantiate all of these claims. So this can now be used in their marketing material in India. So that's what you can do, is how you substantiate your claims. What happens if you don't substantiate your claims? So this is the examples that I wanted to talk about with kind of bad advertising. And the main reason I like to bring these up is they're all news articles. So as I mentioned before, what is the worst part about having unsubstantiated claims or misleading advertising is that your brand will be called out in the media. That's really bad publicity, and that can have an effect on your brand. So the examples that I've brought up are from L'Oreal. So this one, basically they said that the way they worded this claim was that the skin would be as new as a baby's or something. It was something wording like that about a baby's skin, and they had no substantiation to say about how the skin felt like that. You can do that in a consumer study because it's a subjective claim. So my skin is as soft as a baby's. You can ask people if they think that, and they can agree with it. So it's not necessarily a scientific claim, but certainly that was something that they obviously got in trouble for and had to remove that advert. La Mer was accused of false advertising by a beauty blogger. So this was very interesting, and it actually shows how switched on consumers really are now. Now, this beauty blogger in China basically found that the same product was being advertised in the USA, but with different claims on it. So this is before the new CSR regulation came in. They noticed that the claims that were being made in China were much, much stronger and possibly unsubstantiated in China, and that the claims in the USA seemed much more sort of scientifically based. So it does show that consumers can be really switched on. They know they're getting lied to now. Because of articles like this being put out there, they are much more aware of that they could be getting lied to. And again, it makes you more prone to those complaints. Also in India, the ASCI again found 27 kind of different companies that were all putting out false advertisements, and these are big players in the game. This is L'Oreal, Hindustan Unilever, and P&G, and they basically said that they did not have adequate research behind their claims, which is obviously a shame when you have the big players like that. But again, it's just really be aware of what can be put out there about your brand if you don't have that claim substantiation. So just some further advice for consumer studies, basically some FAQs for you, because I obviously get asked these questions quite a lot from our clients, if they're, or from potential clients if they're looking to place a study. So the first one is suggested panel size. People always say to me, what would you recommend as a panel size? It's a hard one to answer because every claim is different and every product is different. But 100 responses is what I would say is kind of your kind of guideline generally for consumer studies. So it's a good thing to keep in your mind. If you're looking at a claim like all hair types or all skin types or all ethnicities, we may be looking at raising that. And if your product is very straightforward with minimal claims that are, very hard to dispute, so there couldn't be a lot of varying answers, it may be lower than that. But 100 responses is a really good guideline. We also have product liability insurance, so that's another thing we get asked about a lot, and you should inform your product liability insurance provider that we do have insurance, that you're conducting consumer studies. We need to have all products safety tested. People often ask me this. Every product needs to be safety tested because it's being put in the hands of our consumers. The level of safety testing is obviously relevant to what would need to be conducted to release that product on the market. So some products, as we know, don't need any safety testing because the ingredients are deemed safe, but obviously that is up to you, and you need to find that out generally from your product development chemist or your supplier for products. Samples should be blinded, so we run blind and debranded. We've kind of touched on that a bit earlier. And that should always be the case for claim substantiation, really, to ensure that there's no bias in the results. You can still do studies that are branded, but I would not rely on them for your claim substantiation. Your questionnaire design needs to support your claims, and obviously we can assist with questionnaire design, and we can actually assist with any advice that you need, and you can always seek that from us. So a bit more information about Ayton Global Research, and then I'll go to a Q&A because I know I've already got a question in and I'm keen to answer that for you. So we're an award-winning research agency. We've got awards for international business and family business that we're very, very, very proud of. We are obviously compliant with the GDPR. I know I mentioned that earlier. So we have our own designated data protection officer, and we've got an ISO 27001. So we get audited in our processes there. It's very important for any research company, whether you're based in the EU or not, to have really, really strict data protection regulations and processes. We've talked about undesirable event reporting, and that's obviously made in cohesion with the Cosmetic Regulations Act. I've talked about product liability insurance, and I've talked about our ISO 9001, which was to do with our quality assurance. We're also a partner to the Market Research Society. I know I said that the NMPA guidelines, again, are very strict on the tests being ethical and conducted ethically for consumers. Well, that is part of our Market Research Society partnership. We do have to make sure our research is ethical and that we're following their code of conduct, and that all of our study designs and questionnaire designs are made in cohesion with them as well. You can get regulatory advice from me on any regulations I can help with. If there's anything I'm unsure of, I always can put you in the right direction. So feel free to ask me anything. And even if I signpost you to someone else, I have a really rich network of connections. I can do that for you. And you always get a designated study manager. So as I mentioned, that's how I started off in the company. You have one person who will know everything about your company and your claims and your products, and make sure that they can take you through the process every step of the way and follow any procedures that you need us to. So I'm going to go to Q&A. I did see a question come in, so I'll quickly have a little look at that one, and I'll be able to help you. So are those guidelines applicable to cross-border e-commerce as well? I'm assuming this is about the CSR guidelines, the NMPA guidelines. So absolutely, yes. Whenever you're looking at marketing and whenever you're looking at advertising, you need to be compliant with the product that the country that your product is being sold in. So if you've got email commerce platforms, and actually this is something I've been talking about a lot recently, because obviously everyone's shifting online with COVID-19. I've released some webinars about it. You need to be compliant with those products, those countries that your product is being sold in, even if you're not based in that country, because the advertising authorities in that country can approach you about your advert. So say, for example, in China with the NMPA guidelines, that's put in place to protect the consumers as well. If a consumer doesn't think that your products had an effect and they complain to the advertising authorities and they find out that the evidence behind your claim is not made in accordance with the NMPA guidelines, you can have your advert removed. So it's really important to be aware of. You shouldn't ever think about advertising as the country that you're based in. Always think about it in terms of the country that you're selling your product. So I hope that helps. So yeah, any other questions come in, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to help with them. As always, I'm also going to send out the recording afterwards with a follow-up email. So please also feel free to email me separately. Don't feel put on the spot now to ask a question, but I'll leave that open for a second. Yeah, certainly a good question with the e-commerce, because like I said, obviously it's always been in place. I think people are just much more conscious about e-commerce now, because that's really how everyone is selling their product. What's great is that, for us, most of our studies, because we are really aware of the global advertising regulations, we can make sure that your study is compliant with all regulations that are relevant to where you want to sell your product from the get-go. So if you are a global brand, we can conduct one study. It may be based in a few different countries, depending on the claims. I always say it depends on the claims. So for example, long-lasting foundation, you couldn't have a UK study and then sell the product somewhere really hot like Malaysia, because the product wouldn't be as long-lasting maybe, because there's it's more humid climate, oilier skin type. Over here we've got a drier climate with drier skin types. So a long-lasting foundation might work here, but it might not work there. So in that example, we might sort of say, maybe let's do a study in UK and Malaysia. You can use those combined studies. But anyway, certainly if you have a product in mind and claims in mind, we can give you the best advice possible to make sure that your evidence will withstand the scrutiny from any relevant advertising authorities. Many of our clients are completely global, so this is something that we are very, very used to. We work with some of the largest global conglomerates in the world in cosmetics and personal care, and our evidence has always withstood scrutiny from the authorities. As long as we are aware of what your markets are and what your claims are, we can certainly give you the best advice possible. So I can't see any more questions coming in, so I'm going to leave that one for now. But please feel really free, like I said, to email me if you have any further questions. Just to finish up, I'm going to point your attention in the direction of the SCS, Society of Cosmetic Scientists. If you're looking to do a diploma course in the Essentials of Cosmetic Science, look no further than the SCS Distance Learning course. This can be done anywhere in the world, and it can be done at your own time. It's all about distance learning. So feel free to look at their website if that's something that interests you. And there's also going to be the 32nd IFSCC Congress in London on the 19th, 22nd of September, not till 2022. So hopefully by then we can all meet in person, and that will all go ahead, and you can register your interest at that now. There is my contact information. But as I said, I will be following up with an email anyway, and you'll be able to email me straight back on that. But thank you so much for listening. I hope that's been helpful. As always, we fit a lot of information into a small webinar. So I wouldn't be surprised if you have lots and lots of questions, but please feel free to let me know. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you very much for listening.